This is the story of David Smith, recognized globally as a forward looking thinker who spots, defines, and helps channel and productively reshape emerging housing and financing trends. I thought David would be a perfect guest for the Coping with Crisis program. David, what makes your business relevant to an audience interested in coping with crisis?
I tend to define, at least for myself, a crisis as a situation in which the external environment is in rapid flux, very rapid flux. There's a big range of outcomes possible. Old habits, old ways of approaching the situation won't work or aren't working. And perhaps most unsettling, we're not in charge of the rate of external change. We have a tendency to overuse the word crisis in our lives. This situation is redefining what is actually a crisis as opposed to merely an inconvenience. But for the last 4.5 decades, I've worked in a field that is almost always in rapid flux with changing rules and a wide variety of outcomes. And I've done that at both the domestic and international levels. And in that process, I've started 2 companies, one for-profit, one nonprofit, one domestic, one global. So I've had the experience and advantage of working in a lot of very different environments. The second thing is, granted, I'm a cheerleader for affordable housing. Affordable housing actually sits at the intersection of 3 domains that are very relevant today. First of all is housing. Today, we are more aware than ever of the role of housing in society and in health and in family stability. I think, by the way, that when the dust settles on this, we're going to see that quality housing and stable housing has been a differentiator as to who's done well and who's recovered and what economies have recovered and so on and so forth. I also think we're going to have a heightened awareness of the importance of housing to health and to bring healthcare into housing. That's a subject on which I've written. So housing is very central to all of this, as indeed demonstrated by the fact that you're doing this interview from your home and I'm doing this interview from my home, and most of the people who are going to watch or listen to this will be listening to it from their homes. So housing is fundamental to family, to society, to everything else. And I've spent 45 years obsessing about it. The second thing is finance. Housing is a big financial asset, and if we go beyond the health aspects of our current situation, financial and economic aspects will come to the fore very rapidly. Indeed, they're already coming to the fore. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about the intersection between housing, which is very tangible and very personal, and finance, which is intangible and impersonal and large scale. Housing is also fixed in one place, and finance is global. And the third part is government policy. Affordable housing is a creature and a byproduct of policy at all levels of government, and policy is rapidly changing, and policy differs around the world. I will occasionally look in this direction because I have a great big map of the world in my home office because I have to remember what country I'm working in and that their circumstances are different. So the situation we're in now affects housing and healthcare and people. It affects finance and economics, and it certainly affects and is affected by government policy. So that's why.
Well, it sounds like those are all good reasons. So, how do you cope with a situation like this with changes, but no previous blueprint on how to cope?
Well, there's a fellow named Maslow, I've forgotten his first name, who talked about the hierarchy of needs. People have a hierarchy of needs. And I adapted Maslow's hierarchy of needs to 2 ideas. Circles of impact and horizons of change. The smallest circle of impact we can have is over ourselves, how we feel, how we think, what we do. Then next is family. In a crisis, everybody wants to know where their family is, immediate, and everybody wants to bring the family back together. Then you go beyond immediate family to loved ones. Then you go to friends. Then if you're an entrepreneur, you go to coworkers and employees, people that you have a working relationship with, and to my way of thinking, if you're an entrepreneur, you have a duty to protect and look out for. Then you go to business acquaintances. Then you go to counterparties. So each of these are circles of impact that you can have. And beyond that, you can go to public officials, local, state, national, influencers, and so on and so forth. The point is that everybody can do something at different levels of impact. I've also observed over this little crisis that when it hit, the first thing people thought about was securing themselves. Then it was about securing their family. Then it's about securing their friends. I've seen a heightened interest in checking in with family and friends and so on and so forth. And that's because people are responding to circles of impact. And I think that's a helpful way to do it, in part because, for example, establishing your live-work arrangements, your work-at-home relationships is part of establishing how you control and put shape on your family environment and then create it to the work environment. So that's one, circles of impact. And it's important to do the circles of impact in the order of priority. Because if you're terrified about your family, it's hard to think about your friends. If you're terrified about your family and friends, it's hard to think about your business. It's hard to think about larger stuff. So it clarifies what you should be focusing on. Second part is time horizons. We are in, if you will, the health emergency phase of this. Beyond that, as the health emergency phase stabilizes in some form or fashion, we're going to start to become in the economic and financial phase of this exercise. And then beyond that, there will be a business recovery phase, and there will be a return to normalcy or a new normal phase, right? And so you think about, I think about, where can I be effective? What is the time horizon where the things that I think I can be helpful for can come into play? In my particular expertise is housing and housing finance, and to me that's a phase 2 of this thing. So I've consciously tried not to think about the health aspects of it, not to think about the health policy aspects of it, to think about the things that will be relevant when housing and economics move to the forefront, because the immediate health crisis is beyond it. So as an illustration, I've been thinking about and then reaching out and making connections with people who are in a position to influence how we rethink income subsidy, how we rethink the intersection between Medicare, Medicaid, and housing assistance, how we change program, how we do interim relief, because right now we're in a period where interim relief is being offered financially and otherwise to a whole lot of folks. How can we make that interim relief fastest, most effective, most easily distributable, most comprehensible? So I work in circles of impact and I work in time horizons. And I have 2 other parts of thinking through all of this. There was a fellow, was an Air Force lieutenant colonel named John Boyd, whose name is sort of familiar in obscure business circles. He was known as 42nd Boyd because he claimed that if he went up in a dogfight with another fighter pilot, within 40 seconds he could be on that guy's tail. He could win the dogfight battle. And he did it by creating a paradigm, the OODA loop: observe, orient, design, act. Sorry, observe, orient, decide, act, okay? Boyd said that in dogfighting and other crisis situations, first you have to observe what the heck is going on. Then you have to orient yourself within that mental space. Then you have to decide what you're going to do, and then you have to do it. And he called that the OODA loop, because each time you do that, each cycle that you do that, you are now in a new environment. You observe, you orient, you decide, and act, okay? Now this was fantastic, because what Boyd also said was, who wins in a dogfight is not the best airplane, it's the fastest OODA loop. And so he said we should design fighter planes not for maximum armament, but for maximum maneuverability and orientation and awareness. And he was the inventor of the F-16, which today is still one of the best fighter aircraft in the world. So I pick up that idea and say, okay, in my world, in my circles of impact and my horizons of impact, how do I observe, orient, decide, and act to anticipate and respond to other kind of folks? And for me, this is very helpful because problems can get you down. Puzzles, by contrast, are things to be solved. And if I can remove my feelings, which is hard to do, remove my feelings temporarily from my ability to think about how to tackle it, then you actually are able to concentrate, you're actually able to come up with something, and you can observe, orient, decide, and act, and you can figure out where can I be impactful today, and what should I be thinking forward to so that other people don't have to.
Very interesting. When you're forced to change your living and working situation overnight, then what are the considerations? What are things to watch out for, etc.?
Well, I believe in commutes. I believe that there is a reason we had a home space and a workspace. And when we are working at home, particularly those of us who are, let's say, for an interval of time working at home and working permanently at home, we no longer have the same natural circadian rhythms of when you're at work versus when you're at home. And this becomes more complicated when you have children or parents, or with the larger the home is. I currently come to you from what I call my marital co-working space. This is my home office, and you can't see it, but down over there is my wife's end of the working marital co-working space, with it's her computer and her printer and so on and so forth. And the rules of engagement on marital co-working are somewhat different from the rules of engagement of co-working in a co-working space. So when I was sojourned here, I said, okay, we have to come up with a structure for when I'm at home and when I'm at work, and when I need the co-working space to myself and when you can have the co-working space to yourself. So I replicated some rhythms. It used to be I would get up in the morning, I would go to the office, and I would get my breakfast. Now I get up in the morning, I take a mile walk outside my house in some direction. So I do my morning constitutional, I come back and I have my breakfast. Then I'm at work. Then I go out for lunch, out meaning to the next room. Then I come back to work. Then I do it for the afternoon. And where possible, I do it at the end of the day. So set up the circadian rhythms and establish and be explicit about establishing what your rules of engagement are. I've talked to a lot of people who have kids. One of them said, my deal with my kid is every hour I will play with my kid for 10 minutes. And the kid understands. Mom's got a 50-minute hour and then a 10-minute me time, and so on. I've heard of parents who are writing out different rules for their kids. This is what I'm going to do for the next day. This is what you're going to do for the next day. So establish those protocols. Make sure that your home office can be selectively private. Work is a place where you need sometimes to think. So whether you hang a notice outside the door, or you close the door, or you have a schedule or a sign-up sheet or a whiteboard, just something that says the doctor is in, the doctor is out, we got to do all of that stuff. I would have two others that I would mention. Oh, next one. Configure your home office so that it can be professional. I don't care whether it's your dining room table and you're doing it across from your marital coworker. Whatever it is, establish a place that is understood to be from time to time your home office. Make sure that the background of your home office, because we're going to be on video, make sure that the background of your home office is reasonably presentable. I'll talk about the video stuff. Get on video, do it now. Don't think twice. You will never go back to the phone. So in my case, light comes in here, dark background there, reasonably clear framing, nothing terribly distracting behind me, okay? Makes it relatively easy. Nan, your circumstances are almost exactly the same, where the light comes from, what the background looks like, and the like. But set up a home office that is understood to be, I don't care, it doesn't have to be very large, doesn't have to be any larger than a workstation at the office, but that's how big it is. This is my office. This is my business space. We have to understand there's a means by which I'm in business. And then the last one, I would say, have more of an organized work plan for your day. I didn't used to do this, but now I do. I keep it really short and I cross things off from it. And even if the things are things that I previously thought would be easy and short, I've gotten in the habit of writing them down. And there's an important reason for that. Because at the end of the day, I want to go back to this list and say, what did I get done today? It might not have been much, but I got something done. I crossed some things off. If you are working at home and you are not used to it, it is all too easy for time to disappear because of distractions. Part of the reason I do my morning constitutional is because in my morning constitutional, when I can't type and I can't write anything down, that's when I think about what am I going to do today, such that when I come back from my morning constitutional, I sit down at my desk, I add to or update or highlight, this is what I want to get done today, and then to the extent I possibly can, I concentrate on doing that. Because the best part of that cycle is at the end of the day, you can say, I got something done, or I got several things done.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I've talked about something similar to that when I have done my video. I totally agree. And in fact, you could even divide them into priorities as well.
Yes, you actually have to spend a little more time. Mine is a very simple chart, but you could have 2 columns or a variety of columns. I tend to use paper, not on a computer screen, because the paper, there is something about drawing a line through it, which is accomplishment, whereas if you just delete the item, it disappears. You have amnesia.
Oh, true. Now you have a business. What do you think about when you think about protecting your business?
Well, I think about protecting my business all the time. We'll start with that. If you're an entrepreneur, that is something you think about all the time. And if you're an entrepreneur, your family has to understand that your business and your employees are your second family, okay? I think about protecting AHI's people as people. One of the very first things that we did, we do a lot of work on Zoom. We work all over the world, so we're relatively good on the platform. So we do our staff meeting on Zoom every week, face-to-face. But before that, when people were relocating to work exclusively from home, I spent time doing one-on-one calls with each of them. It's not a big staff, so I could do this, to say, okay, what's your home office situation? What's my home office situation? And I share some personal confidences. Because if you're going to protect your people, economically, health-wise, business-wise, whatever, they have to feel that you're looking out for them. And they would not necessarily presume that if they've just had a work relationship with you. So I've been very explicit with the people at AHI, and most frankly of the people I do business with in this strange time. I've said, you know, this is the first Zoom call we're going to have. I want you to tell me what your situation is, and I will tell you what my situation is, because in a period of crisis, one half of your brain is always thinking about your family and your friends and your loved one. And you're thinking about the downside and the anxiety, and you cannot turn that off. So if you are talking to someone in a business context and that person doesn't know what's going on in your right brain, you actually are kind of impaired in your discussion because you'll be getting distracted. Whereas I have found, I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert, but I have found when I talk to people about this and I say, show me your home office, people light up. You know, we learn about the dog who recently had his eye out, you know. We learn about the kids who come in. We learn about, you know, where this is located and how people are coping. And so that the protecting your employees and people like your employees, your coworkers, involves in one part is helping their psyches. And talking to people who know you is one of the ways that we protect our psyches, and we we off-gas our anxiety. So the first one is people. Second one is platform. Inventory working capital, inventory accounts payable, inventory accounts receivable. Examine all of the work that you are doing and develop, if you have never done so in your life, develop a 3-month forward projection. Not a worst case forward projection, but a base case forward projection. What does it cost to run the store? How many things about the way we do business have now changed? Some things, our business involves a lot of travel. Turns out we're not going to do a lot of travel for a while. So that's, I won't say silver lining, but that's, just redo a 3-month forward projection. Not very complicated. Just what are the stuff, what are the I gotta pays and what are the I'm gonna collects, okay? Once you've done that, the next one is production. What is the work that we have in process? What are we doing that will enable us to send a bill that someone will likely pay? How do we make sure that the productivity of the office, the organization, I can't even say the office anymore because we don't have offices for the time being. It's significant, by the way, that we tend to use place significators for abstract things. So we talk about the office instead of talking about the organization. What are the things that the organization needs to continue to be able to do in order to generate revenue? And how do we make sure that all of the people and the platform and the processes in that organization continue to be productive? The fourth one, notice, by the way, that some of what I'm just describing is circles of impact and time horizons. Start with the people, then the platform, then the pipeline, the production. The next one is pipeline. That's the fourth time horizon. Where will new business come from? Where will 4 months from now's revenue come from? How will that be impacted? And then there's another one that came up. I don't know where I got it from. I think in metaphors. You know how butter can be turned into ghee? By clarifying it, you heat it very gently, and if you heat it very gently and do the right thing, you can take stuff off the surface and it permanently clarifies into ghee. I do not know how to do this. I have had ghee and it ain't butter, but it comes from just butter and heat and patience. And I was thinking about this 4 weeks ago, and the phrase popped into my head: stress clarifies. What I mean by that is that stress forces you to identify what is most relevant and to prioritize that. And by inference, in our normal life, we don't do this, but by inference, what you are not prioritizing, maybe you don't need to do. Okay? That applies as well to who you value and how the people you work with react. Stress clarifies for you and for them what they care about and what they're going to do. Now, stress, the reason I'm doing this gesture is because I understand if you turn up the heat too much on the ghee or the butter, or you fail to pay attention to it, it curdles. It's permanently ruined. So just as stress clarifies, not every employee turns into ghee. Okay, but and therefore you have to watch for that, because people can burn out. People cannot do so well. So in this whole process, I'm really trying to make sure that, to the extent our people are under stress, to the extent that the people we do business with are under stress, to the extent that our counterparties are under stress or the country's under stress, first of all, be nice to everybody. Be nicer to friends. Be nicest to the ones you're close to. Go out of your way to be extra nice. Say good morning to people, or good afternoon when you see them, even if you see them from 6 feet or 12 feet or 18 feet, okay? And bear in mind that we're all under stress, and if we come through this, which I believe we will, a lot of things will be clarified in instructive ways. And there will be a lot of things that are different. And without getting carried away, I think there will be a lot of opportunity and a lot of rediscovery of America.
I think you're right. You've done your 3 months. You've looked ahead 3 months. Get your crystal ball out and tell me what you think your business will look like in 6 months.
in 6 months, we're going to be hip deep in developing pilot programs at whether, I don't know whether it'll be local, state, or federal. I don't know what kind of asset class, but pilot programs to retrofit and financially reverse engineer existing housing to be more accommodating of live work, preventive health care, wellness maintenance. I'll give you a practical example. Every elderly housing project in the United States of America should have a wellness center in it with an ample supply of masks, testing kits, disinfectant, the whole 9 yards. And there should be, and all of which, by the way, should be funded by Medicare, Medicaid. Okay, absolutely every nickel of it, because it'll save the country a gazillion dollars. We already enacted a gazillion dollars of spending, but this will save some portion of the gazillion dollars. Well, it will save the federal government a gazillion dollars, and it will save lives and make people happier. Okay, so I have ideas as to how to get there. I could write a blueprint for how you do it. I've thought about the mortgage regulations. I've thought about how you finance it. I've thought about how you cross the streams between Medicaid 1115 waiver and Section 8 and stuff like that. I've thought of all of the crud we have to clear away from a regulatory agreement or from an HHS standpoint. I haven't thought about all of it, but I know there's a lot of it, okay? So in 6 months, we're gonna be designing that kind of program. And I don't know quite whom we'll be designing with but for whom, but your listeners may not know, but for the last 10 years, I have written a column for Tax Credit Advisor called The Guru Is In, okay? And it has a small micro circulation, but it's among the people who would quite possibly be listening to this YouTube channel. And as a result, I'm now known as the guru. So if you're in a situation where you got to think up something new, who do you call? You call a guru. So I anticipate that to be happening. And in 6 months, we will be doing a lot of that. We will be doing more work domestically than we have heretofore done. I think the work that we will be doing internationally will include much more of cross-border flows. Because the other thing that's going to happen is that the developed world is going to recognize that it has supply chains and value chains and geopolitical interests in the health and viability of India and South Africa and the Anglophone African countries, right? So there's going to be an awareness that we have a different kind of interconnectedness. And if I were advising on foreign policy, which I'm not, I would say we are going to need the equivalent of the healthcare Marshall Plan, whereby the developed world brings resources and assistance to complement what a guy named Vijay Govindarajan calls the reverse innovation, the innovation from the bottom up. We need to combine those two things together. And I think we AHI will be doing some slice of that in the affordable housing world and in the emerging world. So roughly speaking, that's what I would speculate. And the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And so if you start, let's go back to Horizons of Impact. If you start talking to people about stuff like that and say, I've got a killer idea and this would make a real big difference, and when you're ready to talk about it, let's talk. I did that 2.5 weeks ago with somebody at HUD, and God willing, we'll have a conversation next Friday with some policymakers at HUD where my idea, knock on wood, knock on particle board, where my idea, I'm sure other people have had it too, could potentially become part of the recovery strategy here. I could be wrong, but that's what I think about.
One thing I've gotten out of our conversation is the opportunity that this gives us to do two things. One is think, and the other is plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we go along in our day rushing from one thing to another.
Coping with the inbox, fighting off the inbox.
Yep. And instead, it makes us slow down just a little bit and think about things that maybe our brain says, gosh, I didn't even have that in my brain prior to this, but now I know, and then take that second step, which is critical, which is plan.
And if people have not done so, go to Vimeo or otherwise and find a video called John Cleese on Creativity. John Cleese of Monty Python, okay? He became an executive trainer using humor and the like, and he did a wonderful talk. It's about 28 minutes long, I think so. around what a guy named Douglas McKinnon called the open mode and the closed mode. The closed mode is we're getting stuff done. The open mode is when we're thinking. And he spends a lot of time talking about creativity comes when you're in the open mode, and the open mode only happens when you have time to think. And so, yes, I agree with you, Nan, and this sojourn, whatever it is, creates that opportunity. And the reason I was doing this is because that's part of stress clarifying.
Absolutely right. Thank you so much, David. You go.
You're welcome. You're welcome.